Hey everyone, and welcome to the Key Source. We're super excited to be able to provide you with the information and knowledge you need to be equipped and empowered to take the next step in achieving your real estate goals. So today we're going to be talking about structuring an offer that's going to be competitive, particularly in multiple offer situations. So before we get started, I do want to let you know this is part two of a two-part series. Last week we spoke about how to prepare yourself and position yourself in the best way possible to buy a home in 2021. And now we're going to be talking about all of the competitive clauses and strategies that you can use. So I do want to encourage you, if you haven't watched part one, maybe consider pausing this video, go back and listen to part one, and then join us back here. But we're ready to talk about all of the competitive clauses that will help you win in a multiple offer situation. So let's do this. Hey John, how are you today?
Great, Cassie, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to be doing this video because I feel like it kind of showcases the adaptability and creativity of particularly buyers agents in this market. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack today, but I want to start by asking you what you feel are the most effective clauses that buyers can be using to win in a multiple offer situation.
Well, yeah, Cassie, that's a great question. So there's a couple of clauses that we're seeing a lot in competitive situations. One in particular stands out, and that is called the escalation clause. There are a lot of different perspectives on this clause, and some people love it, some people hate it, but it doesn't matter where you come down on it. It really is smart to educate yourself about the clause and understand it, because odds are if you're a buyer in 2021, you're going to be competing against this, whether you're using it or not. So basically, to kind of help our viewers understand what an escalation clause is, you're basically saying, I'll pay more than any other offer up to, and then you set your top dollar amount. And then you specify an amount that you will beat the best other offer by. Okay, so let's say that the list price of the house might be $200,000, but you would be willing to pay $225,000, but only if somebody else was also willing to pay $225,000 or close to that. So maybe you'll say, I'll pay $1,000 over the best competing offer up to $225,000. That would be an escalation clause in a very basic form. Okay, you would also probably want to have language in there that says, hey, the listing agent is going to have to give us a copy of this competing offer, or at least certain pages of it, to prove that it's actually a real offer. You know what I mean? They didn't just kind of make something up. So that's the basics of how an escalation clause works. The Ohio Division of Real Estate has approved the use of escalation clauses. Columbus Board of Realtors has provided some great language that has been approved by their attorneys, so that we have pre-printed forms that we can fill out to know that we're using good, robust language when we're working with these clauses. So it's a way for us to kind of adapt to the marketplace and be sensitive to the seller's need to get the best possible price, but at the same time be sensitive to the buyer's need to not overpay. So that's kind of escalation clauses in a nutshell. The other clause that you really kind of need to make the escalation clause work properly is called appraisal gap coverage. So that's where, one of the challenges we run into with all these escalation clauses and competitive offers and kind of bidding war type situations is that we can end up with a purchase price that's really higher than what the appraisal might be able to support. And so sellers are worried about being able to actually collect the money that's on the contract. You know what I mean? It doesn't help them at all to have a big number on the contract if the appraisal is not going to support it and they then have to come down to the appraised value. So the appraisal gap coverage is just saying, well, if the appraisal comes in within X number of dollars, could be $5,000, could be $10,000, could be $25,000, any number that the buyer is comfortable putting out there, they say, okay, well, if the appraisal at least comes within this amount of the contract price, then we will cover the shortfall with additional cash that we're able to bring to the table. The seller will not have to negotiate down. So that gives the seller some peace of mind when it comes to the appraisal that, if it comes in low, they're going to have a certain amount that the buyer's going to cover before they have to start taking money off the contract price.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can see why the appraisal gap coverage would be really important. It really adds, I guess, meat to the escalation clause.
Right.
That's really good. I know that especially or at least for my clients, there's always a worry about overpaying in this market where you're escalating the price and then you're also covering a gap in the appraisal and contract price. So what would your advice be for a buyer who's concerned about that?
That's really a valid concern, Cassie, and it is something that I can empathize with a lot because, Rachel and I bought a house last spring actually, fixed it up over the summer. And, with the market moving up as aggressively as it is right now, I mean, we're looking at 10% between 2019 and 2020. It just feels like, wow, we're paying more than we would have paid a year or two ago. Like, can this be okay? And in our experience, so we got the housing contract at a price that we felt fairly comfortable with. We went through the inspections and a lot of it was pretty much what we expected, but there was suddenly between $5,000 and $7,000 worth of structural work that we did not see, we did not expect. So we felt like the sellers should negotiate down to cover at least part of that, if not all of it. They said, no, take it or leave it. And, we had been looking a really long time for, a house with a really nice lot, and that this had, it met our needs in a lot of different ways. The location was perfect. There was nothing else available, okay? So we decided, okay, well, it feels like we're overpaying a little, but we're gonna go ahead and pull the trigger. Well, we also had a substantial renovation that we had planned for this property. I mean, it was in really rough shape when we bought it. So we were gonna completely renovate it. And true to form, we went, 20 to 25,000 over our budget for the house in total. So, part of that was that 5 to 7 that was the structural, but, we went well beyond that. By the time, materials are hard to get and, you just don't quite calculate every little thing. Anyway, it's very easy to blow your renovation budget. So all in all, we were a solid $25,000 higher into the property than we had originally planned to be, okay? And that can feel a little scary, all right? Yeah. But looking back and with the way the market has moved and shifted, that looks like a very, very solid investment right now.
Okay.
So I think that for people, that might feel like a stretch today, but when
Mhm.
they look back a year from now, 2 or 3 or even 4 years from now, I think that the deals that are being done in today's market are going to look solid.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know we mentioned this in a few videos back where we talked about we are seeing a trend of increasing home values. Of course, we don't have a crystal ball. Like we can't
Right,
necessarily predict the future,
right.
but there is a trend there. So I think
Mhm.
that buyers, even though they are maybe stretching a little more than they had planned or dreamed to do, they can feel confident in their
Yes,
investment. So, and advice from an agent is going to be helpful in that too.
yes.
So,
Mhm.
yeah, well, awesome. So you and I know that other than price, there
Yeah.
are a lot of ways that you can structure a really competitive offer. So why don't you identify for us what those strategies would be?
Sure. So in the current environment, we are typically seeing an average, I would say, of 3 to 5, and sometimes many more offers on a popular listing. Okay. So buyers are figuring out which loan types sellers prefer. Um, Sellers show a strong preference for conventional loans versus USDA, FHA, or VA loans.
Mhm.
The reason for that is just that the appraisal inspections, the condition requirements for the house are lower. There's also just kind of less red tape for the
Mhm.
sellers, and they kind of, I think, see conventional loans as more likely to close more easily and faster. So, if there's any way that a buyer can save up the money for the down payment that they need, maybe they can use a down payment assistance program or whatever they need to do. But if they can get into that conventional loan, it will definitely help make their offer more attractive, more appealing to sellers. Um,
Okay.
the other thing that they can do, obviously, is save up the money for their own closing costs so that they don't have to ask the seller to pay their closing costs. Um,
Mhm.
you know, I know that you can kind of roll that into the purchase price and offer to pay extra, but with all the issues we've been having with appraisal, um, really don't like to do that if we don't have to, you know? And then the last thing I would say is, if you want a home warranty, I mean, I think that's great, but maybe consider just paying for the home warranty again out of your own savings versus asking the seller to pay for it. So any
Yeah.
of those little things that you can do to just make the offer more attractive, more appealing, it's going to give you an edge.
Awesome. Yeah, so definitely loan type and just keeping the offer as clean as possible.
Hmm.
Um, make it appealing for the seller to just sign it.
Right.
For sure. Great. Well, okay, so finally, I want to bring up something that makes me a little squeamish, to be honest, as a buyer's agent. But I have heard, I'm sure you have heard, that there are buyers out there willing to waive inspections. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yes, Cassie, I'm with you. I do not like buyers waiving inspections. It makes me uncomfortable. I
Mhm.
want people to know as much as possible about the property going in, so they're prepared for uh, whatever obligations and projects they're taking on. You know what I mean? It's a big responsibility to own a home, and you want to really understand what's going on in that home before you sign the dotted line. So there are a few situations where I think it can make sense for a buyer to waive inspections. Um, Obviously, you know, in the context of this conversation, the seller's going to love that. Okay. It's definitely going to make the offer much more appealing to the seller if the buyer waives inspections, because that's a huge liability now off the seller onto the buyer. Okay. So the one situation where I think it can work is if the buyer, you know, has very strong construction background. Maybe they have strong construction background in their family, or, you know, close friends who can help them figure out what's going on with the house. I would still set up, you know, I think it's a good idea to spend a lot of time really looking at the house well, maybe before you make your offer, if you want to kind of take this approach. But if you spend some real time in the house looking at each of the components, and you have the experience to be able to know what you're looking at, it could be a possibility. You could waive the inspections. Another thing that I have seen that can work well is if you know, maybe you feel like you need certain inspections, but maybe not certain other ones. So maybe it's a house in the country and you just want to make sure that the septic system and the water is good. So maybe you'll waive the other inspections, but you still do well and septic. So those are just some different ideas to think through, but it's really, really important that you talk this through with your agent and make sure that you really have the capability to handle the you know, figuring this out on your own, and then taking responsibility for everything after closing. Because, you know, again, inspections is something, it definitely works, but it's certainly not my first choice in terms of a way to win a multiple offer situation.
Right, right. That's really good advice, I think. Yeah, so just understanding that you might go up against buyers who are waiving inspections, but yeah, that's really going to be a strategy that you want to determine with your agent, and get the advice there that's necessary. So. Awesome. Well, great. I feel like we've laid some really good groundwork for our viewers on how to structure a competitive offer. John, thank you so much for your time talking us through this. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Cassie. It's been great talking with you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, if you're considering buying a home, someone on our team would be happy to discuss your goals with you, and come up with a competitive strategy to help you win in the competitive market this year. So feel free to reach out to us. We do have a lot of content for buyers on our YouTube channel. Feel free to check those out, subscribe, reach out to us. We would love to talk with you. But yeah, so we'll see you next time.